Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. Good night. I would like to express my gratitude to SteelOrbis for inviting me to speak again at this prestigious conference. It is indeed a pity, as we still have travel restrictions in place. I cannot meet you all in person this time, but I'm delighted to share my views. Next, please. I would like to, next slide, please. Yes. I would like to start with a global overview. Then I talk about the recent developments in East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan, and Japanese steelmakers' approaches. Then I briefly touch on our company, JFE Steel. I hope that adding a global perspective will be helpful in understanding the particular situations of the steel industry in East Asia. When I was asked by the SteelOrbis to speak, I was not aware Jim Su would be on the same panel. I have known him almost 2 decades, and I try to be very brief on China. Next, please. Next, please. This slide shows the IMF's the forecast for GDP growth rates, which came out October this year. The bright purple bars for 2020, the green ones for 2021, and the blue ones for 2022. All economies were negatively affected by the COVID-19 in 2020. China was the first country to make a substantial recovery and recorded positive growth. In 2021, GDPs for most countries are forecasted to grow steadily, supported by pent-up demand and government recovery programs. China's economy is forecasted to grow by 8%, India's by 9.5%, and the USA's by 6.0%. Other countries are following in similar pattern. In ASEAN countries, GDP's recovery is forecast to lag behind until next year, indicating that COVID-19 continues to affect the economies in that region. Next, please. Let us look at the PMI Purchasing Managers Indices. Around the world, strong momentum generated by post-lockdown recovery was seen in the first half of this year, but with mixed pictures. Recovery momentum is leveling off. Next, please. A quick look at the COVID situation. The slide illustrates the number of newly confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world. We see the rise in the number of cases in some countries. Of all the countries in Asia, which on the left-hand side are reporting fewer cases. It was unfortunate that when Japan hosted the Olympics and Paralympics this summer, the number of the cases were higher, and we had to hold the games without spectators. Until a few weeks ago, I was thinking, now we have fewer cases. The way the games were held might have been different if we are holding them now. But we now have the new variant. We need to follow the developments very closely. Next, please. If we look at the number of COVID-related victims, the numbers are getting fewer. Next, please. Maybe fewer cases have something to do with the progress of vaccination rollouts. Japan and Korea were late starters, but now close to 80% of our citizens have been double vaccinated. Next, please. This slide shows that when the economies return or a forecasted return to the same level as or above Q4 2019 levels. China reached the crossover point in the second quarter last year, Korea in the first quarter this year, and I will talk about Japan a little later. Next, please. What about steel demand? Globally, the steel industry ended 2020 with a minor contraction in steel demand. growth of 9.1% in China from robust recovery there compensated for a 10% contraction in steel demand across the rest of the world. In 2021, steel demand is recovering solidly, both in developed and developing economies, supported by pent-up demand and government's recovery programs. We thought the similar trend would be evident in China, considering the strong growth in the first half of this year. But due to the slowdown of the economy and the Chinese government's policy to maintain steel production below the 2020 level, China's steel demand is forecast to decrease 1% in 2021. Next, please. This slide compares steel use in 2021 and 22 against 2019. In emerging economies such as Turkey, Brazil, China, and India, also South Korea, steel use already returned to the 2019 level or will within this year. Steel use in other countries on this slide are forecast to return to the 2019 level next year, with the exceptions of the USA and Japan. Next, please. Let us talk about developments in East Asia. Next, please. Our Chinese economy sustained a strong recovery momentum from 2020 into the early part of 2021. However, it has slowed since June. There have been marked signs of deceleration in industrial production and investment. Next, please. Retail sales and passenger traffic are slowing down again. Export is currently supporting the Chinese economy. What is behind the deceleration of the economy? Recent adverse weather and small waves of COVID-19 infections are two factors. Other more substantive causes include slowing momentum in the real estate sector and the government's cap on steel production. Next, please. Let us take a look at the crude steel production. Chart on the left shows strong growth of crude steel production in the first and the second quarters and a sharp decline afterwards. From a high base last year with a continued negative trend in the real estate sector, Chinese steel demand will have negative growth for the rest of 2021. As a result, overall steel demand is expected to decline by 1% in 2021. Next, please. Next, South Korea. South Korea GDP returned to positive in the second half of 2020 and is expected to increase 4.3% in 2021. Export is increasing, auto production was recovering, but is decreasing currently due to the semiconductor shortage. Next, please. The construction sector will be supported by public civil engineering projects and residential construction recovery, switching to positive growth in 2021 and 22. New orders for shipbuildings are recovering. Steel demand is expected to increase 9.1% to 53 million tons in 2021, recovering to the 2019 level. Next, please. Let us talk about developments in Japan. Steel demand is recovering gradually with increasing exports, investment, and consumption. According to the recent forecast, GDP is expected to increase 3.1% in fiscal 2021, recovering to the pre-COVID level in the first quarter next year. Next, please. Business sentiment is recovering but K-shaped. While the manufacturing sector is improving, the service sector remains slow. Next, please. About steel-using sectors, auto production recovered as both domestic sales and exports recovered, but it is weakening presently due to the shortage of semiconductors. Machinery is also back, but the chip shortage is affecting electrical machinery. Next, please. Housing and non-residential construction starts are recovering. Public civil construction has increased due to fiscal expenditure, but private civil construction in general has been weak. Next, please. The recovery in Japan's steel demand will be moderate, and Japan's steel demand is forecast to increase 10.2% to 58 million tons in 2021. Next, please. Last month, the Steel Success Strategies Conference was held in Miami, in the United States, as I attended the event virtually. One page back, please. I was not able to hear the remarks by the panelists directly, but reading through their presentations, I learned the mood there was quite upbeat. Yes, the steel industry is currently enjoying a relatively favorable environment around the globe. Particularly in the US, steel prices have been in uncharted territory, and companies reporting robust performances. Some say that steel prices are entering the adjustment phase, but in terms of current momentum, the US appears to have decoupled from the global steel industry. And with new capacity projects being announced and the substantial infrastructure bill passed, the US outlook remains good. Next, please. The success aside, if I had to choose key words for industry, I would pick two C's, China and the carbon neutrality. Because of the sheer size of the Chinese steel industry, any step taken in it and by it has the potential to cause far-reaching ramifications across our entire industry. Next, please. This chart is from World Steel Dynamics. The red bars for the tons of steel export from China year on year. Next slide, please. Oh, two slides back, please. Okay, this one, yes. Yes, the red bars for the tons of steel exports from China, blue bars for the steel demand outside China, black bars for steel price differences. So this chart eloquently illustrates when China exported more steel, the prices were lower. When China exported less steel, the prices were higher. Presently, Chinese government is pushing a cap on production in light of environmental concerns over the winter, the Beijing Olympics, and toward carbon neutrality. Tax rebate on exporting steel has been abolished. Each of these decisions is contributing to the present situation. If the pendulum swings in other direction, the scenery in front of us would be different. Next, please. I do not have to dwell on carbon neutrality. An increasing number of industrialized and emerging economies have unveiled the targets toward carbon neutrality. As the steel industry is responsible for 7% of CO2 emissions in the world, individual companies are also announcing their own plans one after another. We have the shared responsibility as an industry, but the level of the mission we need to accomplish varies from country to country. Some companies are advanced in engagement they have with their governments for a smooth transition, and others are just at the starting line. Our approaches include development and commercialization of new production technologies, new marketing initiatives, creative solutions to ensure a level playing field, and so on. I think these towards China and carbon neutrality are becoming the basso continuo for the steel industry. We need to continue to face and wrestle with these two issues. Next, please. If we narrow our focus to the steel industry in Japan, these are the challenges the Japanese steelmakers are confronted with. Intensifying global competition, steel demand, Japan's domestic demand is anticipated to decrease, while demand overseas, particularly in Asia, is expected to increase. A number of new projects are being contemplated or planned in Asia, especially in the ASEAN region, which will likely to have consequences for the dynamics for our industry. And carbon neutrality, digital transformation, and COVID-19. Next, please. Then, what are the Japanese steelmakers' approaches to these challenges? Next, please. Earlier this year, JFE, Nippon Steel, and Kobe Steel announced their middle-term business plans. Although the details vary from company to company, the common denominators are reinforcing the steel business in Japan, a global growth strategy, carbon neutrality, and digital transformation. I would like to explain Japanese steel makers' approaches using JFE as an example. Next, please. Next, please. JFE Steel is a part of JFE Group. It has sister companies JFE Engineering, JFE Shoji, which is trading, and JFE Holding is a parent company, has a participation in the leading shipbuilding company in Japan, Japan Marine United. In terms of the contribution to the revenue, JFE Steel is the largest among all operating entities. Next, please. Last year, JFE Steel produced approximately 24 million tons of steel. Over 80% of our products are sheets and coils. The rest are bars and shapes and pipes and semi-finished products. Next, please. This slide and the following slides from JFE's business plan. JFE intends to take twofold initiatives: measures to ensure environmental, social sustainability, and the measures to ensure economic sustainability. Regarding the first part related to ESG, JFE Group has developed its environmental vision for 2050 with an objective of realizing carbon neutrality by 2050. I will provide more details with the following slides. The second pillar is to solve issues impacting society, such as safety and health, diversity and inclusion. The third pillar is to ensure and enhance corporate governance. Next, please. This is a rather busy chart. I would like to highlight these two bullet points above. JFE is taking a multiple-track approach to develop innovative technologies, focusing on carbon recycling blast furnace, plus carbon capture and utilization, hydrogen iron making, maximizing the utilization of leading electric arc furnace technology. Next, please. This slide summarizes what JFE intends to achieve with the carbon recycled blast furnace and CCU. We are stepping up our endeavors to reduce CO2 emissions by maximizing carbon recycling into blast furnaces, reducing basic chemicals such as methanol using CO2 as a resource. One of the products from CCU is plastic. Plastics are collected, reprocessed, and fed into blast furnaces as a resource. These cycles, we hope, will contribute to the circular economy. Next, please. For economic sustainability, JFE intends to transform its steel segment to a leaner, more robust business structure by shifting focus from quantity to quality, striving to achieve world-class profitability per ton, strengthening global strategies, using digital technology to reinvigorate production bases, and accelerating innovation for carbon neutrality. Next, please. Regarding our global growth strategies, this is a diagram of our global alliances. I'm sorry, because of the format, things, some of the numbers are mutilated. We are stepping up our efforts to further promote and strengthen our global growth strategies by providing solutions based on the knowledge, skills, and data to our businesses and our partners, and in so doing, expanding our overseas business contributions to our bottom line. In this business plan, our strategy remains the same. We are committed to grow with our customers globally. Thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for the noise. And this is the time we need to leave office. So this is perfect timing. I cannot unmute this. Sorry about that.
Well, it's great timing. It's great timing. Thank you very much, Fujisawa-san. Really enjoyed your presentation. Now it is, of course, time for the Q&A session. We'll try not to keep you long before you leave the office. If you please allow us to have 5 more minutes, maybe we can have a quick Q&A session if you don't mind.
Not at all. No problem. I'm going to stay for Jim's presentation anyway, so no problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I may have a couple of questions.
Yes.
You have rightfully emphasized the carbon neutrality issue as one of the keywords in steel industry today. And this carbon neutrality issue obviously is a hot topic, one of the most important topics for steel industry, and not only for steel industry, for the entire entire world. Let's put it that way. Yesterday, when we were listening to our speakers, some of them have mentioned that the carbon neutrality issue will be obviously forcing a lot of countries to react, take the necessary steps as soon as possible. And until all those necessary steps will be taken and the carbon neutrality will be taken down, this may also become one of the tools of, protectionism, quote unquote. Let's put it that way. Maybe it's not the right word, but how would you elaborate on that for Asian markets? Would you see it in the same context? What would be your comments?
Mr. Murat, this is the toughest question. Well, this is a very difficult question. Yes, we are following the situations in Europe and also the United States very closely. And there has been active debates taking place in EU. The approaches, the steps toward carbon border adjustment mechanism and so forth. And so they are saying they need to have the level playing field. And because the steels, within the region will be much greener, but the steels outside is not so green as their, steels in the EU. So they try to do some adjustment mechanism. At the same time, they are trying to take away some of the free allocations given to the existing players in the EU. So when it comes to definition of level playing field, this is the very sensitive issue. Definition varies from country to country. The American people are talking and bouncing the level playing field, but look at their prices. Is this the level playing field, or their case is elevated playing field? So whether, so the definition is correct or not, I think I want to leave in the hands of WTO. But some people in Asia talking about, say, if the EU decides to go to the carbon border adjustment mechanism, so that will have impacts on the trade flow. So some countries, Turkey, maybe Russia, are doing some exports, still doing the exports. Some companies maybe say, come up with the greener production system. So they may be okay, but some other countries still have the existing system, may face some challenge. So they might divert the trade flow to some other countries with the less restrictive the regions, maybe ASEAN or something. ASEAN, not so many integrated steel producers at this stage. There may be some more within a few years, but that will change the trade flow. And ASEAN region is close to our Japanese steel producers. That will have some impacts on our marketing strategy as well. So to that end, we are trying to closely monitor what is happening in EU. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure I answered the question correctly or diplomatically. I do not know. So the fairness of the interpretation of level playing field is,
Sure.
needs to be decided by WTO.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that in order to send your questions, please do click on who's attending section at the bottom right-hand side of your screen while you are in the virtual conference room. Then you would need to click on the exhibitors and the conference room option. If you click on that conference room option, you can type in and send your questions. Fujisawa-san, one more question before
Yes.
I continue with a question from the attendees. You mentioned that the demand of the automotive industry is down because of the shortage of semiconductors. That's obviously a very important issue for Asian market, I presume. How long do you think that would continue?
That is also another difficult question. About a week ago, I was speaking to people who are doing sales to automotive sector, and Toyota is the largest Japanese OEM. They are the bullish. They said in the month of December, they will come to the normal auto production. And they will be doing more. I mean, there are people who are doing more overtime to catch up with the loss they made in the past months. So Toyota has known for a very strong supply chain system, so they may have some leverage against the chip suppliers and so forth. But some other OEMs are still struggling the ways. And chips is one thing, and also some other components like the harness and so forth are produced in ASEAN countries because of lockdown and so forth. And they are catching up, but still some have not come to the level where the OEMs want to see. So, say about a month ago, in the first quarter in the next calendar year, we were thinking they will come back to the normal level of operations. I'm talking about Japanese OEMs, but seems like maybe some adjustment in some other OEMs other than Toyota. You ask all laser-pointed questions.
Sorry about that. That's okay. Out of my curiosity.
Yeah, that's okay.
Let me go on with there's a question from one of our
I'm
attendees.
getting the questions in Turkish, but sorry, I cannot understand Turkish.
The question is, will carbon neutrality bring a price increase? Question from Bilge Özkaçagil.
Oh, I see. Let's say European steel producers and some producers in North America, they're trying to differentiate their low carbon steel. They come up with the new brands names. So I believe they're expecting some premium.
Sure.
Or maybe they are getting ready for the days when the free allocations are taken removed from them. So, but the ArcelorMittal and some other steel companies, they're just making, what shall I say, very the advocates of they are informing the stakeholders if the steel industry, continues green transformation, the capex and opex will be higher, and the ton of steel produced will be 50% or 80% higher, according to some of the people said. And even the leading steel company in Japan, they are saying, production costs may be doubled. So I'm not going sure who is going to share the increased, the increased cost portion. I hope the steel company is not the only one to absorb the cost increase. I don't know how much. So depending on the region, each region has a different, and the energy source and some other, say, readiness of the infrastructures, the pipelines to transport natural gas or hydrogen, so forth, and cost components will be different. But unfortunately, the production cost will be higher.
For sure. For sure. Thank you. One last question, Fujisawa-san. We are noticing a lot of, regionalization in steel trade recently. How would you comment on that, taking into consideration the Asian markets?
Oh, that is another tough question. Well, but yes. I think the most of about 80% or 75% that's still being produced are consumed within their own countries. But having said that, 20% or more than, well, I would say between 50 and 25% of steels are traded across the borders. So some other companies, some other countries benefited for the, say, for the open trade, and so that will be some merit for the open trades. And in the Asian regions, and the not so much the regionalization, and I would say if everybody wants to do the same thing, do all kinds of steel grades within their own country. So that will be inefficient and effective, and the cost increase needs to be borne by users of the steel. So that is not so good. And so we are the believers of the open steel trade, and we understand the governments and the countries prefer local contents and etc., etc. But I think there is always room for these steel import and export to play. I hope I answered your question.
That was good. That was good. Thank you very much. So I believe there are no more questions from the audience. So that concludes the Q&A session. Fujisawa-san, arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you very much.